My wife cheated while I was recovering from surgery, so I took the house, the car, and left her family in total shock. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and I thought my marriage was solid. I had worked hard to build a life that felt stable, long hours at the office, managing bills, keeping the mortgage on time, and slowly stacking some savings for the future. Sarah and I had been married for just over 2 years, and on paper, everything looked perfect. Friends envied us, family approved, and honestly, I felt proud to have found someone who seemed to fit so seamlessly into my life. She was kind, attentive, affectionate, and somehow managed to make every small moment feel special. From laughing over coffee on lazy Sunday mornings to planning weekend getaways to cities we'd never been. Life was predictable in the best possible way. My job, though demanding, didn't drain me completely because I had something to come home to: a warm house. The faint smell of her cooking lingering in the kitchen, the soft hum of music she always left on. We'd talk about the future, maybe kids in a few years, vacations to Europe, little projects around the house. There was a rhythm to our days that made me feel safe, almost untouchable. Like nothing could disrupt the life we were building together. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't have tiny moments of worry. My doctor had scheduled me for surgery soon, a minor procedure, or so I was told. But the thought of being confined to bed for weeks, unable to manage daily routines or responsibilities, made me uneasy. I brushed it off, though. Sarah had promised she'd handle everything: meals, bills, even driving me to appointments. I told myself I was being paranoid. I felt proud of our marriage, proud of the trust we shared. I genuinely believed that Sarah would be there for me no matter what, and that together we could handle any bump in the road. There was a quiet contentment in knowing that the life I had worked so hard for wasn't just mine, it was ours. Little did I know, that sense of safety, that trust I took for granted, was about to be tested in ways I could never have imagined. The day of the surgery arrived, and I won't lie, I was scared. Not just of the procedure itself, but of being completely dependent on someone else for the simplest things. Sarah stayed by my side the entire morning, holding my hand in the pre-op room, whispering, "You're going to be fine. I've got you." I wanted to believe her with every fiber of my being. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and anxiety, the fluorescent lights harsh and unforgiving. But seeing her smile, though tense, gave me a sliver of comfort. After surgery, I came home exhausted, my body aching in ways I wasn't expecting. Simple tasks like getting out of bed or reaching for a glass of water felt monumental. Sarah had promised she'd handle everything: cooking, cleaning, checking in on emails and bills, even picking up groceries. For a while, it felt like heaven. She hovered in and out of the kitchen, prepared my meals, made sure I took my meds on time. I watched her and felt a deep sense of relief. This was why I had married her, why I trusted her completely. But soon, subtle things began to prick at the back of my mind. She'd get phone calls late at night, her voice dropping just slightly when she realized I was awake. There were texts she quickly hid when I entered the room. Once, I noticed a receipt tucked under the counter that didn't make sense: an expensive dinner, charged to her card at a restaurant she claimed she hadn't been to. I hesitated to ask. I told myself I was imagining things. My body was weak, my mind foggy from painkillers, and I wanted nothing more than to trust her, even as these little doubts grew. I found myself falling back on what I wanted so badly to believe: that she was taking care of me, that she loved me, and that everything was fine. I told myself these were just minor distractions, temporary blips. Nothing that could shake the foundation of our marriage. But deep down, a tiny knot of unease was forming, a sense that the world I had built around Sarah and me might not be as solid as I had convinced myself it was. And yet I pushed it away, focusing on recovery, thinking the worst would never touch us. The first real signs of something being off started small, almost imperceptible. But they gnawed at me. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and catch Sarah on her phone, thumbs flying, voice low, smiling at messages she quickly minimized when I moved. I told myself it was harmless friends checking in, maybe work, but the pit in my stomach refused to disappear. Once, I noticed an unfamiliar name popping up repeatedly, a name I didn't recognize. When I casually asked, she laughed it off. Just someone from work. Don't worry about it." But the laughter didn't reach her eyes. Even during the day, subtle inconsistencies began stacking up. She'd claim she was out running errands only for me to find evidence she hadn't left the house. Receipts, oddly familiar smells on her clothes, phone notifications I didn't recognize, little breadcrumbs that made my chest tighten. I felt foolish for noticing, but my instincts screamed that something was wrong. Every time I asked, her answers were quick, smooth, and reassuring. And I wanted to believe them so badly that I ignored the sinking feeling in my gut. Friends started dropping hints too. Casually, "Are you sure everything's okay at home?" They tried to be subtle, but the concern in their eyes cut me deeper than I wanted to admit. I brushed it off, clinging to the hope that my marriage was strong, that Sarah loved me, that she was just stressed or tired from juggling so much. But the quiet unease was growing, a shadow over every conversation, every meal, every shared laugh. I started noticing patterns I couldn't unsee. Late-night showers, sudden trips to the store, the way she'd tense when I asked where she'd been. My body still weak from surgery, my mind clouded with painkillers. I found myself constantly questioning, constantly watching, feeling trapped between disbelief and suspicion. And yet, despite all these small alarms, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. I wanted to believe in us, in the life we'd built, in the love that felt so real. But deep down, a whisper of dread had begun to grow louder. And I just knew, that the trust I had clung to so fiercely might be the first thing to break. I discovered it completely by accident. I had been dozing on the couch after another grueling day of recovery, my body stiff and sore, when a notification popped up on her laptop, a message she hadn't logged out of. I wasn't supposed to be looking, I told myself, but something inside me demanded the truth. What I saw made my chest seize and my hands shake. There it was, plain as day, flirty messages, pictures, and conversations with someone else, someone I didn't know, someone who wasn't me. My stomach dropped like I'd been punched. I felt betrayed in a way I never imagined possible. The person I had trusted with everything, who had promised to care for me while I was vulnerable, had been lying the entire time. The house felt suddenly cold and alien, out the soft hum of the fridge and the faint smell of dinner I hadn't touched hours ago turning sinister in my mind. I sat there, frozen, reading message after message, each one tearing at the fragile sense of safety I had built for myself. When Sarah came into the room, I couldn't speak at first. My throat felt dry, my hands trembled, and for a long moment, I just watched her. Trying to reconcile the woman I loved with the betrayal glaring at me from her laptop. I found these, I finally stammered, my voice barely audible. She froze, eyes darting to the screen. Her smile faltered, and suddenly the warmth I associated with her vanished. She tried to laugh it off. Nervously at first, then defensively, insisting it was nothing, that I was overreacting, that I didn't understand the context. My heart pounded. My mind screamed at me not to trust her excuses. But I still wanted to cling to a shred of hope that there was some explanation, even in that moment. Though I realized something terrifying. The life I thought I had, the stable, loving marriage, the trust, the care, was an illusion. And in that quiet, sunlit living room, as my body still ached from surgery, I understood that nothing would ever feel safe again. I confronted her that night, trying to keep my voice steady, but my chest felt like it was on fire. "Sarah, what the hell is this?" I demanded, pointing to the laptop. She froze, her eyes wide for a split second before she tried to laugh. Nervously at first, then with the practiced ease of someone used to deflecting blame. "It's not what it looks like," she said, voice sharp now, defensive. It's complicated." "You don't understand." I couldn't breathe. Every ounce of trust I had carefully built was crumbling in front of me. "Not what it looks like?" I echoed, disbelief and rage rising in my throat. "I'm lying in bed, recovering from surgery, depending on you for everything, and how could you?" She avoided my gaze, fiddling with her hands. I felt lonely. "You were always in pain, always tired, always—" Her words trailed off. The excuses poured out like a food stress, fatigue, needing attention. But none of it erased the images, the words, the betrayal. I couldn't stop shaking, my anger and heartbreak mixing into a kind of nausea I had never felt before. Then, in a twist that I didn't see coming, she admitted it fully. "Yes, I cheated," she said, barely above a whisper. "But it wasn't about you." "It's not like I don't love you," my mind reeled. Not only had she betrayed me while I was at my most vulnerable, but now she was twisting it, trying to soften the blow with half-truths. Her family, who I had considered our allies, suddenly became part of the equation. I realized they would likely defend her, no matter what, painting me as overreacting or paranoid. The weight of it all pressed down on me, and for the first time, I saw just how alone I was in this. And yet, in the middle of that anger and humiliation, something shifted. I wasn't going to explode, at least not yet. I needed to think. I needed to plan. Because if she thought I'd just roll over, that she could get away with this, she was dead wrong. After the initial shock faded, I realized I couldn't just let this go. I had spent years building a life with Sarah, investing everything, my time, my energy, my trust, and she had shattered it in a moment of selfishness. But raging at her wouldn't fix anything, and losing control wouldn't help me reclaim what was mine. I needed a plan, a way to take back the power that had been stolen while I was recovering. Vulnerable and completely exposed. Over the next few days, while she acted as if nothing had happened, I quietly started gathering information. Bank statements, property deeds, car titles, account details. I meticulously documented everything. Every asset we shared, every financial foothold I had, I cataloged. I made copies, took notes, and quietly made arrangements to secure my rights. Sarah never suspected a thing. She went about her day, laughing, texting, pretending everything was normal. It was infuriating how casual she was. How little she realized that I was no longer the same man she had betrayed. I confided in one friend, carefully, someone I trusted implicitly, who reminded me, "You don't have to rush. Just be smart. She shouldn't see this coming." Those words stuck with me. I realized that the most powerful revenge isn't loud or violent. It's calm, it's calculated, and devastating in its inevitability. I could watch her scramble, feel the shock when she realized her security was gone, and still remain composed. Every night I lay in bed, still recovering, still weak, but my mind was sharp and focused. I imagined the moment she and her family would finally realize that she couldn't manipulate me anymore. I imagined the disbelief, the anger, the panic, the sweet taste of finally being untouchable. It was enough to keep me going when exhaustion threatened to take over. And the pain from surgery made me feel even more powerless. And in that quiet, calculated preparation, I began to feel something I hadn't in days: control. The life she tried to undermine wouldn't be hers to enjoy. I was already setting the stage for her shakand. I wasn't stopping until every piece of her betrayal was paid back, in a way that she'd never see coming. It all hit me at once one evening, sitting alone in our quiet, half-empty house. My body was still weak from surgery, my muscles aching with every small movement, and my mind felt heavier than it ever had. Sarah was out probably on another errand, and for the first time I let myself really feel the weight of it all. The betrayal wasn't just infuriating, it was suffocating. Every memory of trust, every moment I thought we were building something real, now felt like a cruel joke. I remembered lying in bed, barely able to lift my arms, thinking about how she had walked into our life like a warm light, only to dim it completely. The house felt colder than I had ever known. The hum of the fridge, the faint smell of her perfume lingering in the hallway, even the soft creak of the floorboards, it all reminded me that I had been alone in my vulnerability, and she had used it. My chest tightened, a combination of grief, anger, and exhaustion that left me physically trembling. I called a friend, trying to hear a voice of reason, but even their words, "You'll get through this. Man, just breathe," felt hollow. I felt trapped inside my own mind, questioning everything. Was the marriage ever real? Did she ever love me? And worst of all, could I ever trust anyone again? For hours, I stared at the ceiling, feeling completely powerless. Even the plans I had quietly been making for retaliation seemed futile from this state of weakness. I wanted to scream, to break something, but my body wouldn't cooperate. The man I had been proud, capable, and control was gone. All that remained was this hollow shell, betrayed and broken, barely able to process the depth of her deception. And yet, as despair pressed down on me, a tiny spark remained, a flicker of determination buried beneath the anguish. I knew I couldn't stay here forever. I couldn't let this betrayal define me. But right now, in the dark, quiet house, with only my racing thoughts for company, I hit rock bottom. I had no idea how I would climb back up, or what it would take to make her finally pay for what she had done. After the night I hit rock bottom, something inside me shifted. I realized that despair was a choice, but so was action. I couldn't undo what Sarah had done, but I could reclaim my life, my dignity, and the control she had tried to strip away. Slowly, deliberately, I began executing the plan I had quietly been preparing for days. I started with the finances. Every joint account, every bill, every asset we shared I reviewed, cataloged, and secured. I set up transfers where necessary, made legal arrangements to protect what was mine, and ensured there would be no loopholes for her to manipulate. It was meticulous work, quiet but potent. She had laughed, gone about her days, never suspected that the man she had taken for granted was already regaining power in silence. Every interaction became a performance. Sarah continued her routines, cooking, cleaning, laughing, but I was calm, measured, untouchable. I didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't show my hand. That was the beauty of it. Every smile she gave me, every casual comment, now carried a weight she couldn't recognize. I was waiting, and she had no idea. The house itself became my silent accomplice. I watched her movements, noted her patterns, and used them to time every decision, every action, ensuring that when the moment came, it would hit with maximum impact. Even my friends noticed a difference. I was quieter, more focused, almost eerily calm. They whispered about how different I seemed, how composed I was, but I only smiled. They didn't know it wasn't calmness. It was preparation, and late at night, lying in bed, I allowed myself small fantasies of the moment she and her family would finally realize she couldn't manipulate me anymore. The shock, the disbelief, the anger, it all played out perfectly in my mind. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt a glimmer of satisfaction, a sense that I was no longer powerless. But even as I plotted quietly, a small question lingered at the back of my mind. Would she see it coming? Or would the fallout leave her completely speechless? The tension hung in the air like the calm before a storm, and I knew when it hit, it would be unforgettable. The first sign that my plan was working came one morning when Sarah tried to check our joint accounts. Her confusion was immediate, her face draining of color as she scrolled through statements she didn't recognize. "Wait, what?" she stammered, voice trembling. "Why? Why can't I access?" I stood nearby, calm, leaning against the kitchen counter, watching her struggle to understand that I had quietly shifted control. It was intoxicating, the way power feels when it's been stolen from you and returned. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell or threaten. I simply let her panic fill the room. She paced, muttering under her breath, and I could hear the first whispers of fear as she realized she had underestimated me. I had expected shock, but the raw, visceral panic on her face surpassed even what I had imagined. Her family soon caught wind of it. Calls started coming in, first from her sister, then her mother. "What did you do?" They demanded, anger lacing every word. But I didn't flinch. Calmly, I explained legal facts, ownership details, and the boundaries I had set. They were speechless, scrambling to find a loophole or explanation, but there wasn't one. For the first time, I felt like the adult in the room, the one with control, the one who couldn't be manipulated. Sarah's attempts to charm, manipulate, or guilt me fell flat. Every plea, every excuse, every tearful apology bounced off the walls like soundproof glass. She was desperate, and I was untouchable. The house, the car, the finances, everything was firmly under my control, and she had no choice but to face the consequences of her actions. As I watched her struggle, a part of me wanted to gloat, to relish her disbelief and anger. But I didn't. I let the silence and the shock speak for themselves. That quiet power, that calm dominance, felt far more satisfying than yelling or retaliation ever could. And as the day drew on, and her family continued to call in confusion and panic, I realized something. The betrayal may have broken me once, but this calculated reclaiming of my life was more satisfying than I could have imagined. By mid-afternoon, the tension in the house had reached a fever pitch. Sarah paced the living room, phone pressed to her ear as she tried desperately to explain herself to her family. "No, it's not like that. I swear I didn't." Her voice cracked, pleading with people who were already furious, but every word fell flat. They had called me multiple times, demanding answers, but I remained calm, deliberate, and unwavering. I had prepared every detail, and now it was unfolding exactly as I had envisioned. Her panic was almost surreal. I watched her struggle to comprehend that the control she had taken for granted, the house, the car, the accounts, was gone. She kept looking at me, searching for the familiar warmth, the trust, the softness that had once defined our relationship, but it was gone. I had traded my pain and betrayal for calm, measured power, and she could feel it. Even if she couldn't articulate it, neighbors and friends, who had always thought I was the quiet, patient one, began to notice too. Whispers of the situation spread, subtle glances filled with curiosity and incredulity. It was satisfying, not because I wanted to humiliate her publicly, but because the injustice I had endured was now being acknowledged, even quietly. She had underestimated me completely. The fallout was visible in every twitch of her expression, every stammered word. I didn't gloat, didn't yell, didn't give her the satisfaction of a fight. I simply maintained a composed, silent dominance that spoke louder than any argument could. Every frantic call to her family, every attempt to manipulate, every tear shed, none of it changed the fact that she had lost control. And as the evening settled in, I felt a strange mix of relief and satisfaction. The betrayal that had left me broken, exhausted, and angry had been met with precise, silent retaliation. Sarah and her family were stunned, speechless, and scrambling, and I was finally in a place where I could breathe again. But even in the quiet, I knew there was one final confrontation ahead, a moment where words would matter, where feelings would surface, and where true closure could finally arrive. The next morning, I decided it was time for the final confrontation. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, silent for once, nursing a coffee she hadn't really wanted. The house felt almost surreal, quiet, except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator. I walked in calmly, keeping my voice steady, and looked her in the eyes. "We need to talk," I said, and for the first time, she didn't roll her eyes, didn't deflect, didn't try to charm me. She knew this conversation was different. I laid it all out, how I had discovered the messages, how I had felt utterly betrayed, how I had been weak and vulnerable after surgery, and how she had taken advantage of that. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't beg for an explanation. I just told her, plain and calm, the truth about my feelings, my hurt, and my disappointment. Every word landed like a weight she couldn't lift. Every pause filled with the gravity of the betrayal she had caused. Her defenses crumbled slowly. She tried excuses, explanations, blame-shifting, but I didn't let her interrupt. I spoke about respect, trust, and the value of honesty in a marriage, the very thing she had discarded without thought. She kept looking down at her hands, at the floor, at anything but my face. And I realized that she finally understood the depth of what she had lost. For the first time, I saw vulnerability in her eyes, not charm. Not manipulation, but genuine recognition of her mistakes. She admitted it fully, quietly, and the room felt heavier because of it. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply listened, absorbing the moment of justice, the acknowledgement that I had reclaimed my life with dignity, and in that stillness, I felt a sense of empowerment unlike anything I had experienced since discovering the betrayal. I was no longer the victim. I was the one standing firm, unshaken, and finally in control. The silence spoke volumes, and the closure, though quiet, was absolute. But even as the weight lifted from my chest, I knew life would move on in unexpected ways, and that the lessons I had learned would shape every decision from here on out. In the days that followed, the house finally felt like mine again, not just the walls and the furniture, but the peace, the control, the certainty that I was no longer at the mercy of someone else's betrayal. Sarah had retreated, her family gradually accepting that I wasn't going to be manipulated or bullied. I went about my routines with a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in weeks, my body still healing from surgery, but my mind sharper than ever. Every small decision, every interaction, reminded me that I had reclaimed my life. I reflected a lot on what had happened, on how quickly trust could be shattered, and on how easy it is to overlook warning signs until the consequences hit you in the chest. But I also realized something crucial. The same strength that allowed me to survive betrayal could be harnessed to rebuild, to grow, and to protect myself. The anger, the heartbreak, and the humiliation had taught me more about myself than I could have ever learned in a life untouched by pain. I started planning for the future again, carefully, intentionally. Trips, investments, personal projects, everything now carried a sense of autonomy I had never fully appreciated before. I no longer felt naive or powerless. I had learned how to protect myself, how to assert control, and how to move forward without letting anyone else's mistakes dictate my life. There was still a strange satisfaction in imagining the shock on Sarah's face the first time she fully understood that she had lost everything she had tried to take from me. But more than revenge, it was the empowerment, the reclaiming of my dignity that mattered. I didn't need her to grovel, didn't need her apology, didn't need validation. I had restored my own sense of worth, and as I stood in the quiet house one evening, watching sunlight spill across the floor, I realized that the betrayal, as devastating as it had been, had led me to a place of strength I never knew I had. I was free. I was whole. I was finally in control of my life again. Not even the deepest betrayal could take that from me.